Hi, Stuart Box here again to describe for you in this video session the proper installation of a Restraint product. I trust that you've watched the mechanical joint installation video. And remember, it is critical that whether you're using a Restraint gland or a standard gland, that the proper installation is followed when you're tightening the gasket so that you get a good seal, because the Restraint gland is first and foremost a sealing device, just like a regular gland, and then it becomes a restraint. So it must be sealed properly, following our installation procedure, which you can find on all the products on our webpage. Installation procedure specifics there for you that I may or may not have covered in the video. This is the gland that I installed previously, and I'm going to now demonstrate how to make it a restraint. I want to also point out that this is a piece of ductile iron pipe, and this is a piece of PVC C900 pipe. This is our restraint device for PVC pipe. We call this SLCE. This is for ductile iron pipe. We call this SLDE. These processes don't matter what type of pipe it is until you get to creating a restraint. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences between ductile iron and plastic. So I'm going to continue to describe for you the proper installation of the restraint gland and how to make it a restraint. I do want to point out that we provide restraints in packed units where the gland and all of the accessories come in packaged in a box for you. It's sealed so that it doesn't get damaged by the elements out at the job site. So everything that was used to make this connection in the previous video comes in our box. We call this an SLCEP, for P for pack, and that's for the PVC version. And we have a SLDE pack for the ductile iron version. So I'm setting aside the PVC components because I've already have the demo set up for the ductile iron. But remember, there are only slight differences. This is a 4-inch piece of pipe, and on our 4-inch restraint, we only have 2 inserts that actually lock in place to restrain the fitting from coming off the pipe. The forces that cause the fitting to want to come off the pipe are a result of pressure inside the pipe, whether it's static pressure or pressure as a result of flow. Those forces that are being exerted on the fitting want to make the fitting come off the end of the pipe. So if you have a standard gland and a fitting on a pipe, there's a possibility that that fitting will be pushed off of the pipe, and obviously that would cause a leak and costly repair, property damage, all sorts of bad things. The original mechanical joint was restrained by pouring concrete behind the fitting. Thrust blocks. Thrust blocks are big, heavy, expensive devices to be installed in the field, and quite frankly, if you poured a thrust block behind this cap, you could never take this cap off again. You'd have to chip out the concrete. So the industry recognized that there was a need for a device that was more reliable, less expensive for installation, and would allow you the flexibility of going back and doing work on this without having to remove concrete. That was the advent of the restraint gland, a gland that also can restrain the fitting. The only difference between a restraint gland and a standard follower gland is the addition of a mechanical apparatus that's used to lock the gland to the pipe. It's actually teeth on an insert that's underneath this break-off bolt. The break-off bolt is used to engage the insert into the pipe. The insert actually doesn't finish engaging until the system is pressurized and there's an opportunity for the forces to actually cause the insert to wedge into position and lock for holding the pressure that it's designed to hold. I'm not going to go into the specifics of the pressure ratings. They're in our product catalog, which you'll find on our webpage. The installation instructions are also found on our webpage. We've tried to make it easy to get to so that you can reference it in the office or in the field. So please go back and review the mechanical joint installation video so that you're up to speed on how all of this is done properly. Once the mechanical joint seal is done properly, it's really quite simple to finish the restraint application. We already know from the installation of the gland and the gasket and the pipe that we're centered, but it's important to check and make sure that nothing's changed. You can just visually look around and make sure that there's no wide variation in where the gland is relative to the pipe and the fitting. Once you've confirmed that, hand tighten the break-off bolt so that the insert is just snug up against the pipe. You want to do this on all the break-off bolts. Again, this is a 4-inch and there's only 2. There could be a big fitting. The process is exactly the same. There's just more of these. So you hand tighten all of them first. Once they're hand tightened, you can finish the installation by breaking off the head. We like to recommend that you use a star pattern when tightening these break-off bolts, and that you go somewhat slowly in terms of engaging them uniformly around the pipe. It could actually, if you tighten one side to break off prematurely before the other side's tightened, you could actually move the pipe off center, which we don't want. We want the pipe centered in the fitting. So once you get them good and tight by hand, then you need to use a larger device. I'm going to use this torque wrench to break this off, but any tool can be used to break off the head. Once you've gotten the insert against the pipe, hand tight, and then tighten to the point that your hand tool is no longer effective. All right, so now you've got whatever device you're going to use to break off the head, and you're just going to snap one off and continue in your star pattern until they're all broken off. Break off head. Now this insert is engaged properly in the pipe. Final engagement won't happen until the system's pressurized and the insert actually wedges into place. I would do the same thing in a star pattern all the way around until I'm done. And it's really that simple. Remember, it's a mechanical joint gland first to seal the gasket against the bell, then it becomes a restraint. Hi, Stuart Box here with Laurie. Laurie watched the video on the restraint installation today, and I believe she has some questions. Restraint installation is one of the, although most of these things are quite simple, for novices it can be a little bit confusing. So Laurie, I think you have a fairly long list of questions there.
I do. I have a lot of questions. What type of restraint is most often used on ductile iron pipe with an MJ fitting?
Right, so we use a wedge action restraint, and our part number, product name is called the SLDE One Lock, where One Lock is the trade name and SLDE is the part number. D stands for ductile.
Well, what's an SLDEP?
An SLDEP is a packaged unit of all the things necessary, including the gland, to make the connection. The T-bolts, the nuts, the gaskets, as well as the restraint gland itself.
What type of restraint is most often used on C900 or C909 PVC pipe?
Again, that's a wedge action restraint. You're talking about with an MJ fitting?
Yes, with an MJ fitting.
That's our part number SLCE, and again we sell that as loose, which would be an SLCE, or in a pack, which is an SLCEP.
Okay. What type of restraint is most often used on an IPS PVC pipe with an MJ fitting?
Okay, that's a good question, but I gotta ask you a question first. What does IPS mean?
Iron pipe size?
It does mean iron pipe size. And the difference between iron pipe size and PVC C900 or C909 is that iron pipe size has the same OD as steel pipe, and C900 and C909 have the same OD as ductile iron. So we use in the same restraint in C900 as we use for iron pipe size, but the difference is that there's a spacer underneath the break-off bolt that has to be removed. That allows the insert, the wedge, to travel further to engage in the smaller OD iron pipe size pipe.
Can an SLCE be used on IPS or steel pipe ODs for all sizes?
No, not for all sizes. The transition gaskets are required because the diameter of the pipe is smaller, and the profile of the transition gasket, it makes it susceptible to leaking in the larger sizes. So we only recommend, we make specific recommendations for sizes other than 12-inch and down, and those recommendations would come from engineering. So if you have if someone has an application where they want to use a SLCE for something with an iron pipe size, larger than 12-inch, we need to recommend that through the engineering department.
Can you use restraints, wedge action restraints on push-on fittings?
The general answer is that the wedge action restraint will work on whatever type of pipe it's designed to work on. It will restrain, but there are applications where, for example, the push-on fitting, where there's not enough restraining lugs for the wedge to hold against. So we have other products that are specific to connections that don't use MJ fittings, and we'll do additional videos to describe the installation of those particular products. But in general, the wedge action restraint will hold on the pipe that it's designed for. It just needs some special stuff to connect to something that's not an MJ fitting.
Okay. I noticed that you really do break off the break-off bolts. What's the
Well,
purpose
it's
of
called a
that?
break-off bolt, so.
What's the purpose of that?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is we want to be able to know that the installer has tightened the break-off bolt and engaged the insert properly. We can't guarantee that torque unless we know that the head's broken off. So the head is designed with a small neck that breaks off consistently at the same torque. That way when the head's broken off, we know for a fact that the proper amount of torque was applied to engage that insert. You can also, one other thing, an inspector on the job can look and see whether or not the installation's been completed properly.
Well, I just have one more question on restraints. Are there certain standards that these products meet?
There are, but again, without having a list in front of me, I recommend we go to the website and look for our registrations and our certifications. They're all there. www.sigmaco.com.
Thank you.
Restraint products.